The bathroom. Have you ever heard of the ghost of the Second City Butcher? For years now, a story has traveled through circles of the Chicago youth about a man named Jack Donahue, a struggling comic and improv performer. The story goes, one rainy, chilly night, as these stories usually do, in 1981, old Jack was performing at some club with his improv group. They had already performed a few sketches, taking suggestions from the audience, and things had been all right to that point. After the third or fourth sketch, however, a heckler from the audience began to make himself heard. Every time Jack would ask the audience for a new topic, the heckler would pipe up. He would shout, "You suck! You're horrible! Get off the stage!" Or, "The other members in your group are much better than you. What are you even doing up there?" This continued all through the performance. No one came to Jack's aid, not even the other members in his group. The people that were there say what finally drove Jack over the edge was when the heckler shouted, "My God, man, you're the worst one up there. If the other members were smart, they'd fire your unfunny ass after the show." Some of the people there said they thought they saw a few members on stage crack a smile. Whatever the case, Jack ran off the stage. People could hear glass breaking. Then Jack leapt back on stage with a fire axe and proceeded to hack his improv group to death. The audience watched on in complete shock. Jack then turned and spotted the heckler. He jumped off stage and attacked. The man was so drunk he fell over, and Jack plunged his axe in the heckler's skull. In all the commotion, Jack was able to escape out the back door. He ran into the rainy night. The cops were on him in a matter of minutes. They chased Jack down to Chicago Grand Union train station, where he holed himself up in the ladies' bathroom. Sadly, the club wasn't the only place where Jack left his trail of carnage. He killed a janitor, 3 women, and an elderly couple while inside the station. The police waited 30 minutes to negotiate, but talks were going nowhere. They called it off, busted down the bathroom door, and blew Jack away. What? Get the hell out of here, April. I'm going to hang up on your ass. That story is bullshit. No, Julie, that story is real. Come on, April. I'm in the bathroom right now. I don't want to hear this. I know. That's why I'm telling you what happened in the room you're in right now. Isn't it great? Isn't it creepy? Just think of all the carnage that happened in that bathroom, Julie. You're sitting in one of the grisliest crime scenes that's ever taken place in that city. Oh yeah? Then why haven't I heard of it? Why isn't it more talked about? Come on, Julie. The authorities covered it up, as usual. It happened past midnight. No one was there, and the few people that were either paid off or their jobs were threatened. It was election year, and the rumor was some big money donors paid off everyone, from people at the club to the few at the station, just to protect the mayor getting reelected. I don't know, April. This all smells of bullshit. I'm telling you, Julie, and that's not even the best part. The even more creepier part is that the bathroom is haunted. People say when the lights start to flicker, a chill can be felt. And in between flickers, Jack's reflection can be seen if you're staring in the mirror, holding his bloody axe. So whatever you do, Julie, don't wash your hands. All right, that's it, April. Goodbye. I hung up the phone, left the stall, and went to the sink to wash my hands. As I turned the water on, the lights began to flicker. This can't be happening, I thought. The building's just old. It's probably just the wiring. I turned the faucet off. A chill brushed across my arm. I began to tremble. I slowly looked up, and in the mirror, there he was. A man in a black jacket holding a bloody axe. I screamed and ran as fast as I could out of that bathroom, jumped on my train, and never looked back. This was word for word my account of what happened to me that day in the station bathroom. The last time I was ever in Chicago. Don't think I'll ever go back. You can believe me or not. Makes no difference to me. But my name's Julie, and I relayed this story to my friend to tell all of you. Please be careful of the ladies' bathroom. I'm going out with a bang. It's often joked around that working at the Fullerton location will either mentally or physically break you, or make you run with your tail tucked while yelping. There are employees who have spent decades there, and I too have spent more or less 8 years working at Fullerton mostly, but have worked at other locations. For purposes of time, I can't relate all of the weird tales I have accumulated during my time there, but if I had one story to tell, it would be this story. For this story, I was alone, and no one else could say, "I heard it too, boss." Unlike the time we had just stocked the timetable racks, and entire boxes worth of Pacific Surfliner schedules cascaded onto the floor, as the night lead and I were straightening up the ticket office for the morning crew. I remember we both stood there for a minute to a minute and a half, just watching these timetables that were thick, bifolded pamphlets fly off the rack, as if we were stuck in the opening scene of the original Ghostbusters movie. I mean, I was wondering when Slimer, the mischievous poltergeist, was going to make an appearance, or somehow find out it was a prank played on the two of us, who were mischievous in our own right. Let's just say, if you left your coffee mug by mistake, or left your work boots outside your locker, or left your locker unlocked, let's just say my work son and I could be very creative with the confetti from the paper shredder, clear packing tape, etc. I can't tell you all of our secrets of being a trickster. There we stood, on each side of the Surfliner timetable cascade. We thought it would be even funnier if we had cascade route timetables and they cascaded to the floor. Alas, it was SoCal's own Pacific Surfliner. He was in charge since he was the night lead. It may be strange to some, but had this been on a weekend morning, I'd be the one in charge. After the last timetable tumbled to the floor, we both looked at each other in complete shock, and he finally broke the silence with, "Al, you're cleaning that up." Of course, I protested. "I didn't do it, so why do I have to clean it up?" "Because I'm in charge," he says, with a grin. "And I don't want to clean it up. Plus, I'm going to do baggage on the next train." I couldn't argue with him. He was the night lead, so 5 days a week he was responsible for closing up the station. He wouldn't tell me the things he's dealt with being alone at night, but my story is far worse than anything that happened to him. or the very least, that he was willing to admit. Because one night, out of all the nights I worked, scared me into religion. I called my husband so frantic I was almost speaking in tongues. My poor husband isn't one to believe in the paranormal, so in his mind, I just escaped some crazed killer, dressed as a clown or something. Firstly, what happened? I didn't actually see anything, but even the memory of what I heard, still to this day, gives me that spine chill that starts at your tailbone and runs up your back. I literally can't explain or find a rational explanation. One night I had to close the station, and it oddly was an uneventful night. Everything was going exactly as it should. The passengers were friendly, the trains all arrived and departed on time, and even the baggage was light. I had cleaned the station to almost perfection, without any kind of disturbances, from bums trying to pull tricks or shoot up in the lobby or restrooms. I didn't have to call the police once, and I had filed my nails to perfection. It was a great night. Our station ticket office closes at 10:30 p.m., but it was our habit for people departing on our last train at 10:55 p.m. to give them a little room, just in case. Honestly, it's because I'm a sucker for hard luck cases. If they get stranded, I couldn't just lock the door and bid them good luck and good night. I was left alone after that last southbound train. There were no bags for people to claim, so I locked the door right after the train's lights faded off into the distance. It was 11 p.m., and since everything was going so smoothly, I had finished all my duties, and all I had to do was wait for 11:30 p.m. and punch the time clock and hit my freeway home. I took a book and gathered my things right next to me in the agent's office, where the time clock was, and I put my feet up on the desk to read a few chapters, then head home. The entire station is dark. The only lights are those low-level emergency lights attached to the various exit signs, and computer screensavers in an Amtrak blue glowed in the ticket office. The only lights on were in the agent's office because they were always on. I was deep in my book, as I am a bookworm. It was around 11:10 p.m., and what sounded like a cannon firing or a propane tank exploding, you get the gist, a giant bang rang throughout the station. It was so intense, I sat petrified for a moment. I realized I had maybe locked a homeless person in with me, and the locks on these doors are old but sturdy. Maybe it's a homeless person trying to get out, I thought. So I crept out into the ticket office to look at our security camera monitors, because this way, if it was a person getting violently angry in the lobby, I was still safely behind the glass wall. The cameras showed an empty station, but I knew there was a blind spot. Honestly, most places have one, so I knew I had to go check that area, even though my heart was thudding in my chest. I gathered together the station's cordless phone, in case I had to call 911, as well as my own cell phone, a radio in the event that the phones get taken from me. I can send a distress call out to the BNSF dispatch, and a large maglite flashlight. I planned carefully because this noise, although it was just once, was so loud it shook the window. I was sitting there, reading. So whatever made that noise, I didn't want to have a confrontation with. but unfortunately, I had to. I couldn't let the morning crew get caught unawares if someone was trapped, and after a noise like that, I'm sure they would break out a window, and I would be held responsible for it. Not one to shirk my responsibility, I made a battle plan. First, I'd run to the back and flip every light on in the station. I was going to throw on so many lights you could see the station from the space station. Next, I was going to quickly and as deftly as I could open the lobby door and run through it in a quick circle. The last thing I'd do is check the restrooms, and that is where it gets scary, because the men's room is right there, and since all the windows are closed up right now, even if I scream at the top of my lungs, no one would hear me. I have had so much non-paranormal bullshit happen to me there. It was hard to say if I'm afraid of ghosts or afraid of men, like the creep who pushed his way into the men's room while I was cleaning it. He thought he was slick and had me cornered. I even felt the air rush as he reached for me, but I stepped into the stall, locked it behind me, and started screaming. The men's room window faces right out to where the taxicabs park, and I'm no fool. When I took inventory of my working conditions, first thing I figured out was make things nice with the cabbies. The time the guy had me stuck in the men's room with him, all the cab drivers popped out of their cabs. Some came to the window to curse at the guy in Romanian. A few others ran inside to alert my coworker. After that, I kept my cell phone on me at all times, even though it was technically against policy to have it. This night was different, though. There was probably no taxi out front because the station was closed. Even if they were out there, getting their attention and fending off an attacker would be next to impossible. All these things were racing through my mind, but I had to see if someone was in the lobby. I flipped every light on, ran through the lobby, looking at every door, every lock, and finally poked my head into each restroom and found nothing. My heart is just pounding, and I'm starting to sweat. After eliminating all human or natural sources to that bang, I had to let my mind go into the darker corners. As I made my way back into the ticket office, I passed by one of those humongous wooden train station waiting room benches. These benches were at least 20 feet long and double-sided, so passengers could sit on either side. We used to joke that they were probably worth a lot on that antique roadshow. Even I said, if they ever try to get rid of them, I'd gladly take them and refinish them. You don't see sturdy craftsmanship anymore like that. As I was locking everything back up and turning off lights, I thought the only thing that could make such a noise was as if something or someone picked up that bench and dropped it on that stone floor. The station has amazing acoustics. Those acoustics could have added that extra punch to that bang that rattled the window and had me rattled to the bone as well. If there was a poltergeist capable of lifting that bench and dropping it, I didn't want to be there for its next trick. I clocked out at 11:15 p.m. and left a hurried written explanation to my manager up in Santa Barbara that I did not care if everyone got a good laugh out of this, but that I got scared by a not-so-friendly ghost. And hello. Yeah, I tuck-tailed and ran. After finally getting my husband to understand there was no one around, and that this mysterious bang had to have had supernatural origins, he agreed. I did the right thing, no matter the consequences. The next time I was at work, my manager reached out to me and told me not to worry about it. She gets ghost reports all the time. I'm not the first railroad worker to run home crying because a ghost scared me off. This was of course interesting, but honestly, that bang cured me of ever wanting to go on a ghost hunt like you see on TV. Me, myself, and I hope I never ever encounter a bang like that again. I'm out with that bang. A free train to Reno. The man in the cowboy hat and eye patch didn't look like a man. No, he looked more like a leather boot. I don't know if it was the bourbon in me, but he looked like he wanted to talk. And what do you know? He told me he sold his soul to El Diablo on a train going to Reno. I laughed at him. Who believed that? But he told me to listen, and I let him go off. Here's what he said. It wasn't very long. I scribbled it all on a napkin. Here's what I remember. If you're ever gonna go out west, don't take the free train. They'll tell you it's free. Don't believe 'em. It isn't. Those dust devils make you pay with your own blood, my boy. I got here on $2 and a popped liver, and I'll never get them back, God damn it. Never. I'll tell you something, son. The evil eye is real. Fish eye, crazy eye. Call it whatever you want. It'll turn your guts pitch black. It'll burn your whole fucking face off. You'll wish you were blind. If you ever see it, you might as well stick your eye in a barbed wire fence. You'll drink yourself half to death to drown it out of your memory. It hurts to drink now. My tongue's been turning white. See? I can't even scream anymore. And the worst part of it all, it's stopping at my grave. Hey, next stop? You're next. That cracked him up. Then he rubbed his eyes and chugged the rest of his Lone Star beer and started to walk out the door. I've got to go, he said, or I'll miss my ride. I set my house on fire and got ran over by a train. She ran as fast as she could. She thought her legs were going to fall off, passing through the crowds of people in the noisy city, through the tall concrete building and weird-smelling alleyways. She was running towards the train station. She needed to get there before it found her. Her feet were burning. She was barefoot after all. There's not much time to put your shoes on when there's a monster chasing you. But luckily, she had managed to grab her wallet and phone before booking out of her house. Well, what remained of her house. She had set it on fire in the hope of killing it. As she arrived, her mouth dropped. It was too late. She had missed the last train. The station was empty. There was nowhere to run. Another train was supposed to arrive in 20 minutes or so, but it wouldn't exit the station until the next morning. Shit! She yelled in exasperation. This thing, this monster, had been chasing her for over 5 years. She thought she had gotten rid of it, but it came back, and there was nothing she could do to stop it this time. For a moment, she thought of giving up. No matter how she looked at this, everything was hopeless. She'd fought against it for so long. She was tired. She checked her phone and was not surprised to see a text message. Every time the monster attacked her, she would receive a text message from an unknown number. It seemed like the thing wanted to talk to her. Not warn her or anything, just mock her, and make sure she knew that there was nothing she could do in order to stop it. The text read, "Very clever," followed by, "But I'm still here." She looked up, and there it was, standing on the other side of the tracks, something that looked like a fancily dressed boy, wearing a white suit with a black tie and no shoes. It had always creeped her out how much the thing managed to look so familiar, yet very inhuman at the same time. Something about its face. It didn't look quite how it was supposed to. Its eyes especially. When it stared at you, it felt like being stuck in a sort of dream. Not quite right, but not wrong either. She started to step back, and it started to walk in her direction, reaching her platform. It was time. The sound of an approaching train could be heard closing in. The woman was tired of running. This thing had taken away everything from her. Right now, the only thing she wanted was to at least decide the way she was going out. She ran at full speed towards the thing and tackled it into the incoming train. The boy looked at her in complete shock. "What? Afraid to die? Well, I'm not," she proclaimed without any hesitation as the train was upon them. Look at all these rumors. I think with any company, office gossip is a given. Amtrak is no different. I'm going to share some quick, unsubstantiated claims of crazy things that happen in and around, or very near, Los Angeles Union Station. It's been a few decades now, but in railroad time, this is still considered recent. Los Angeles put in a light rail subway system called the Metro, and another rail system to outlying suburbs called MetroLink. These companies are city and state-run services versus Amtrak that gets its funding from those sources, but federal monies as well. Just as I explained before, this is why terminals and stations that share services are called Union Stations. Los Angeles Union Station has a long history of its own, and it wouldn't take much research for me to write an entire book of all the things LA Union has seen. There was a rumor that persisted that when they broke ground in the 90s to build the Red Line tracks and platforms, they had unearthed an unsanctioned cemetery, or illegal cemetery. The rumor has it they had disturbed the resting place of Chinese migrants who back in the 1800s built the original rail infrastructure. A quick Google search will confirm that the railroad was originally built by tycoons who were in it for maximum profit. Therefore, to them, exploiting a community in need of substance was normal. Without going on a social justice tangent or demanding apologies from perpetrators long dead, let's just say that this cemetery was almost exclusively people of Asian descent, and many had died of malnutrition and other usual suspects of back then, such as yellow fever, cholera, and scarlet fever. It's worth mentioning that Chinatown in Los Angeles is in walking distance. People who worked in LA Union before the groundbreaking and then after swear that they angered some spirits, and stuff just happens. But it's hard to get anyone to say what kind of stuff that is. But I got one tidbit of what kind of stuff they mean. Amtrak's baggage warehouse sits at the rear of the building, facing the tracks, and the red line itself. This is called a warehouse because it is just that, a huge industrial-size area that ceiling could easily fit another story into. Way up on that ceiling are the huge fluorescent light fixtures that are several feet long and hang down from the actual ceiling from chains. This is so the light is actually useful below. One set of fluorescent lights swings on their own. There is no rational reason that the light just swings. Employees just ignore it and go back and forth under those lights 24/7. No one really knows why it swings, but it does. Is it angry Chinese ghosts? Or is this just a tale for hazing a greenhorn? The train station. This is a true story. When my aunt passed away a few years ago, I was devastated. She lived pretty far away from me, so I didn't get to visit her often, though we were fairly close. She lived near New York City, so whenever I would visit, we'd hop on a train and spend the day in the city. A few months following her passing, I had a dream about her. I was with my family in a crowded train station, surrounded by people I didn't know. I felt that it was odd that I didn't recognize them because I typically see people I know in crowd scenes in my dreams. I remember feeling like it was a lucid dream, and I knew I wasn't awake. I remember each face in the crowd, even to this day. The only person I recognized was my aunt. She approached me. We talked for quite a while. She told me she loved me and that she thinks about me often. I knew I was waking up, so I hugged my aunt goodbye and thanked her for the visit. Before I left, I stopped and looked at her and asked who all the other people surrounding us were in the station. She shushed me and said as clear as day, "Honey, don't acknowledge them. As soon as you see them, they see you." Then I woke up. To this day, I've never spoken a word about this to anyone, and I'm not really sure how to interpret what she meant by that. This is worse. I can't say my life was great. I mean, I barely had any friends, and my family always just seemed like people I knew, instead of the close-knit, emotional support group that other people had. Even as an adult, the couple of relationships, finger quotes for emphasis, I ended up in were more like social exercises that happened because of public expectations and had nothing to do with any real connection with anyone else. But this is worse. Much worse. I think it was an accident. The last thing I remember is standing on the train platform and feeling pressure on my back. I don't know anything after that, where I went or when I realized I died. But I can't really understand time or days or anything anymore. All I can do is wander around, not really knowing where I'm going. No one sees me. They can't feel me as they walk through me. Can't hear me when I cry for help. I don't know why I'm even here. Shouldn't I go somewhere else now? My only real thought is, why am I alone? If I'm here, then are there other ghosts? Where are they? Can they help me? Or is loneliness to be my hell for the rest of eternity? My magical ink wristwatch. I'm in a line of work which requires that you wear a wristwatch, as carrying a cell phone is unacceptable, but timing is key. Unfortunately, I'm very forgetful, and while en route to only my second ever paying gig, I realized I'd left my faithful old Casio at home. I sat cursing audibly on the busy inner city train, wondering what the heck I was going to do, as the stores would be closed at that time. A weird little girl, who seemed somewhat familiar, grabbed my wrist and drew a crude digital wristwatch in red ink before I really had time to resist. "This watch will last a lifetime," she said, in a strangely atonal voice, "and will always come in handy." I laughed at the insanity of the situation, but stopped when I saw the time on my wristwatch change from 8:03 to 8:04. I think my heart stopped too, for a second. I looked up, searching for the girl, but she was gone. My gig was eventually rescheduled anyway, but frankly, I was more preoccupied with this crazy new thing on my wrist. My ink wristwatch, which kept perfect time. Unsure if I was losing my mind, I tried to scrub off the wristwatch later that night, but it remained as indelible as a tattoo. I spent the longest time just sitting, staring at the thing. Hours and minutes, updating with such uncanny accuracy. I scoured the internet for any relevant information, but for once, Tor turned a blank. I caught the same train the next day, just to try to catch that weird little girl, but I never saw her again, except in memories as I replayed the incident over and over. Maybe I'd seen her once before, while I was working. She might have been one of the daughters of my first client. There was definitely something off about her icy fingers and lifeless eyes, but I don't believe in ghosts. I guess I must believe in magic, though, as the evidence is there on my wrist. The only semblance of rationality that I can apply to this situation is that the wristwatch is some sort of psychological manifestation of my body clock. Yesterday, I held my breath and counted to 10 because I had the hiccups, and the numbers on my wristwatch began to flicker and fade away, as if the battery inside was dying. That wasn't the weirdest thing that's happened regarding the wristwatch either. I have to spend a lot of time hiding in shadows, in alleys and attics and closets, and I realized I could still see the time on my new wristwatch, as if it's illuminated in red LEDs. I can always cover it with my hand, though. The light isn't the problem. What gave my location away to the corrupt politician and his mistress was the alarm on my watch that went off, alerting them to the fact that I was hiding under their bed with my garrote. Who wants to go down that creepy old tunnel? Train stations by nature, for the most part, have tunnels. I have not personally worked at Chicago Union Station, but I have friends who have done so for years, before moving out to sunny California. One day, to pass the time in between rushes for train tickets, we were sitting in Los Angeles Union Station's ticket office, just talking. Somehow, our conversation turned to tunnels. Not train tunnels, but tunnels made for foot traffic around the station. This is how our conversation went. We talked about a service available to anyone who asks for it, as long as the station is large enough to have it. And this is called a red cap. Our red caps are wonderful people. I know, I'm married to one, who will pick you up in a little golf cart style buggy and drive you to your train, or help you to where you need to check your luggage or find help with tickets, and lastly, drop you off at either the lobby or first-class lounge. They work for tips, so of course they're the best sort of characters we have to offer. The benefit is you're safely in the hands of a professional who navigates not only the tunnels, but can get you right alongside of your train. These are truly the hardest working men and women in any large station. They know every nook and cranny and which tunnel goes where. You sit back and enjoy the ride before your epic once-in-a-lifetime or weekly commute Amtrak train experience. If you're not a travel-savvy person, ask for a red cap. You can't miss them because they literally wear red caps with red polos and jackets. Our conversation turned to how nice the red caps were in Chicago when she worked there. Most of them would use this little used tunnel system that actually, back in the days of trains carrying mail, connected Chicago Union to the U.S. Post Office across the street to the station. Now, being the paranormal and true crime buff I am, my ears completely perked up at hearing that those tunnels not only still exist, but are used as a shortcut to a parking area for employees. Without having a kind red cap take you the secret way, the place where employees could park was a long stroll. And well, it is Chicago after all. I pressed her for more information. I was firing off questions like an FBI interrogator. What did it feel like down there? I would get straightforward answers that were obvious. It's a tunnel, sweetheart. It's dark, stank. It has pipes running from God knows where to God knows where, filled with God knows what, all drip, drip. And I wasn't interested in investigating. I wanted to go through and get out as fast as possible. There was just something about those tunnels in particular. First, they ain't exactly maintained, you know what I mean? Technically, we aren't supposed to use them, but they were the best shortcut. I used to turn my light from my phone on, but still close my eyes, always expecting something from a horror movie to jump out in front of us. Then we would have to run it over. You feel me? So to be clear, before I dropped my little bomb, I asked, specifically, the tunnels that connect from the old post office basement to our tunnels that used to move baggage from the days before Amtrak was the only interstate passenger rail service. Just basically gave you an unsettling, scary, creepy, in a sense like you don't belong down there. type heaviness of spirit? The answer was hell yeah. Those tunnels creeped me out. I'd close my eyes till we made it through. They were just, and she just paused and said the magic word for me. They were just demonic. No other way to describe them. To this I just smiled. My colleague's worker scoffed and said, "You don't have to believe me. I know how I felt." I felt bad that she mistook my smile for mockery when it was meant as a confirmation. It was a confirmation for me because this born-again Christian, who wasn't prone to flights of fancy nor ghost stories, had just confirmed that the dozens of accounts of paranormal activity in the old post office basement was with very good reason. I asked her one last question. Have you ever heard of the earliest American serial killer, H. Holmes? She said no. Why? It was then I shared this little bit of American history. Some of it has been proven as fact. The rest is all speculation. In the 1890s, H. Holmes, an alias used by a con man, arrived in Chicago and quickly purchased the lot that would later be the post office to build his hotel, or as it's remembered in history, his murder castle. The World's Fair was held in Chicago in 1893, and it's rumored that rooms in his hotel were set up as gas chambers, and others had trap doors. The only common thread is that supposedly his would-be patrons turned victims would end up in the basement, where he would experiment on them, then dispatch them and sell them as skeletons to medical schools. None of this was ever truly proven because the hotel was gutted by a fire and torn down by its foundation. Only the basement remained. Later, by the 1930s, the post office built up in the location that used to be the murder castle, and they renovated the basement. They even found it convenient in relation to Union Station to mail distribution. It's worth mentioning that what a Union Station was in the days that you had the Illinois Central and the BO and the Canadian Northern and all these rail companies sharing one central or neutral location, saved money and made it easy for a train passenger to transfer from the Illinois Central to Burlington Northern without having to travel to a different location. Union stations are located all over Rail America. They made getting the mail to customers very efficient. That is why those old tunnels exist under Union Station, Chicago, that connect to the old post office basement, or even older, the basement to H. Holmes' murder castle. I have never been there, but after hearing about them, you couldn't pay this horror buff, true crime buff, to venture down into those tunnels. I must note, the tunnels I am referring to are not used to move passengers around. By no means. These are secret shortcuts known by employees. We would never knowingly, deliberately, take a civilian into these tunnels. If you do, use a red cap. Definitely thank them, and it's good karma to give a little something something to show the love.